Welcome back to Finance Empire Real Life Stories. Before we begin today's story, let me ask you something. Have you ever trusted the people around you at work, only to realize someone was secretly taking advantage of you? Maybe it was credit for your hard work. Maybe it was office gossip, or maybe, just maybe, it was something as simple as your lunch disappearing from the fridge every single day. At first it sounds funny. A missing sandwich doesn't seem like a big deal. But when it keeps happening again and again, the frustration starts to grow. The office stops feeling comfortable. You begin to look around differently. Every smile feels suspicious. Every coworker becomes a possible suspect. And that is exactly what happened to Marcus. What started as a normal Monday afternoon slowly turned into an office mystery that changed the entire workplace forever. But this story is not only about stolen food, it's about stress, pride, embarrassment, workplace pressure, and the hidden struggles people carry behind polite smiles and professional clothes. As always, this story will also help you improve your English naturally through real-life conversations, emotional vocabulary, useful idioms, and workplace expressions that native speakers use every day. So grab a coffee, relax, and step into today's story. Because once Marcus opened that office refrigerator, nothing at work would ever feel normal again. The clock on the office wall slowly ticked toward noon. For most employees, lunchtime was simply another short break in a busy workday. But for Marcus, lunch had become sacred. His mornings were exhausting. Back-to-back meetings, constant emails, deadlines that never seemed to end. By midday, his carefully prepared meals felt like the only peaceful moment he had left. The night before, Marcus had spent nearly 2 hours cooking. Not because he had to, but because cooking helped him relax. It was his escape from spreadsheets and endless notifications. He had marinated fresh chicken in lemon juice, garlic and herbs. He roasted vegetables until they were perfectly caramelized. He even prepared homemade garlic quinoa with chopped parsley and olive oil. The meal smelled incredible. When he packed everything into his green container late Sunday night, he actually smiled to himself. Tomorrow's lunch was going to make the workday bearable. That thought stayed with him all morning. So when the clock finally struck 12, Marcus stood up from his desk with relief. He stretched his stiff shoulders and walked toward the break room, already imagining the first bite. But the second he opened the refrigerator door, something felt wrong. The middle shelf was empty. Marcus blinked slowly. Then he checked again. Top shelf, bottom shelf, behind the milk cartons, next to the old salad dressing bottles. Nothing. His container was gone. At first he thought maybe someone had moved it by accident, but deep down he already knew the truth. Someone had stolen his lunch. Again. Marcus closed the refrigerator door slowly and stood there in silence. The cool air from the fridge faded, replaced by heat rising into his chest. "Looking for something?" Sarah asked casually from the coffee machine. Marcus forced a laugh. "My lunch disappeared again." Sarah sighed immediately. "Oh no, not again." Marcus turned towards her. "You mean this keeps happening?" Sarah nodded while stirring sugar into her coffee. "People have been complaining for weeks. Someone stole Jennifer's pasta last Thursday, and yesterday Kevin lost 2 protein bars and a sandwich." Marcus rubbed his forehead in disbelief. "Seriously?" Sarah leaned closer and lowered her voice dramatically. "People are calling them the lunch thief." Marcus almost laughed at the ridiculousness of the nickname, but honestly he was too hungry and irritated to find it funny. "This is unbelievable," he muttered. "It literally has my name written on it." Sarah shrugged helplessly. Apparently that doesn't stop them. Marcus walked back toward his desk, but his appetite had already turned into anger. It wasn't even about the food anymore. It was about respect. He worked hard. He followed the office rules. He minded his own business. And yet somebody was treating his effort like a free buffet. The rest of the afternoon dragged painfully slowly. While coworkers laughed and chatted around him, Marcus could barely focus. His stomach growled every 20 minutes. He eventually bought stale crackers from the vending machine, but they only made him feel worse. By 5 o'clock, Marcus had made up his mind. Whoever was stealing lunches needed to stop. The next morning, Marcus arrived earlier than usual. The office was still quiet. Only the cleaning crew and a few early employees had arrived. Marcus sat at his desk holding a bright yellow sticky note and a black marker. At first, he tried to stay calm and professional. He carefully wrote, Please do not take food that does not belong to you. Thank you. Simple, polite, reasonable. He walked into the break room and stuck the note directly onto the refrigerator door where everyone could see it. For a moment he actually felt optimistic. Surely the thief would stop now. Maybe they just needed a reminder. Maybe it had all been some misunderstanding. But by lunchtime, Marcus realised he had badly underestimated the situation, because someone had added another sticky note right beside his, a small blue note. It read, "Maybe if your food didn't smell so good, I wouldn't be tempted." Marcus stared at the note in complete disbelief. A smiley face. The thief was joking about it. Not only were they stealing lunches, they were mocking him publicly. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. This wasn't accidental anymore. This wasn't carelessness. This was deliberate. He looked around the break room carefully. Several co-workers were eating quietly. Nobody reacted. Nobody looked guilty. Everyone appeared perfectly normal. And somehow that made Marcus even more suspicious. He ripped both sticky notes off the fridge, crushed them into a ball, and threw them into the trash. The game had changed, and Marcus was done being polite. That afternoon, he opened a fresh notebook at his desk and wrote 3 words across the top page. Suspect list. At first it felt ridiculous, like he was starring in some cheap detective movie. But the more he thought about it, the more serious it became. Someone in this office was lying every single day. Marcus started observing people carefully. First was Mr. Henderson, the senior manager. The man practically lived at the office. He always rushed between meetings and never seemed to bring food from home. Yet somehow, he always had lunch. Interesting. Then there was Leo, the young intern. Leo constantly complained about money while spending ridiculous amounts on gym supplements and energy drinks. Marcus had personally heard him say, "I'm starving all the time," at least 5 times that week. Suspicious. Then came Chloe from accounting. Quiet. Reserved. Always nervous around people. Marcus noticed she often lingered near the fridge before quickly walking away. His imagination started running wild. Every small action suddenly seemed meaningful. A coworker opening the fridge too quickly, someone glancing around before grabbing their lunch, a nervous laugh, an awkward silence. The office no longer felt friendly. It felt like a crime scene. Marcus hated what the situation was doing to him. He didn't want to become paranoid, but every missing meal pushed him further. By Thursday afternoon, he had reached his breaking point. Enough was enough. If the thief wanted a game, Marcus would give them one. That evening, Marcus stood alone in his kitchen preparing what looked like the perfect sandwich. Fresh steak, melted cheese, toasted bread, caramelized onions. It looked incredible. But hidden deep inside the sandwich was Marcus's secret weapon. Ghost pepper sauce. An absolutely brutal amount of it. The kind of heat that could make grown adults cry. Marcus carefully sealed the sandwich inside his green lunch container and smiled coldly. Tomorrow, somebody was going to regret stealing his food. The next day, Marcus placed the container right in the centre of the fridge, where nobody could miss it. Then he returned to his desk and waited. 10 minutes passed. Nothing. 20 minutes. Still nothing. Then suddenly, a loud choking sound echoed from the break room, followed by violent coughing, and then frantic shouting. Marcus immediately stood up. His heart pounded as he walked calmly toward the kitchen. Co-workers turned their heads curiously. Someone laughed nervously. Marcus pushed open the break room door and froze. Standing near the sink, coughing violently, was Mr. Henderson. The senior manager's face was bright red as he desperately gulped water straight from the faucet. Marcus blinked in shock. Had the manager really been the thief all along? Mr. Henderson looked up with watery eyes. "What kind of psycho hot sauce is this?" he gasped. Marcus looked past him toward the fridge. His sandwich was still untouched inside the container. Mr. Henderson had only sampled the hot sauce bottle sitting nearby. A complete false alarm. Several co-workers burst into laughter. Marcus forced an awkward smile, but inside, frustration crashed over him again. The thief was still out there, still hiding, still watching. And somehow they had escaped his trap once more. Marcus returned to his desk feeling exhausted. But now the mystery felt even deeper. The lunch thief was patient, careful, smart. And Marcus had a terrible feeling the real confrontation was still coming. But he had no idea that the truth behind the stolen lunches was far more heartbreaking than he ever imagined. And in part 2, Marcus finally comes face to face with the real thief. Caught completely red-handed inside the office break room. But when the truth comes out, Marcus must decide something far more difficult than revenge. Should he punish the thief? Or help them? I'll see you in part 2. The office felt strangely tense after the failed hot sauce trap. Even though everyone laughed about Mr. Henderson accidentally burning his mouth, the story spread through the building faster than Marcus expected. By the end of the afternoon, people from other departments were stopping by the break room just to joke about the deadly sandwich incident. Marcus forced polite smiles every time someone brought it up, but inside he felt more frustrated than ever. The real lunch thief was still out there. Still stealing, still hiding, still treating the office refrigerator like a personal buffet. And worst of all, Marcus was starting to feel obsessed. That night he couldn't stop thinking about it. While brushing his teeth, he thought about it. While watching television, he thought about it. Even while trying to sleep, his brain replayed every suspicious moment from the office. Whoever the thief was, they were careful. Too careful. Marcus stared at the ceiling in the darkness of his apartment and realized something important. The thief probably understood office routines better than everyone else. They knew exactly when people left their desks. They knew when the break room was empty, and they knew how to avoid attention. This wasn't random anymore. This was strategy. The next morning, Marcus arrived at work earlier than usual again, carrying his lunch container carefully under one arm. But this time, he had a different plan. Instead of relying on traps or warning notes, Marcus decided he would watch the break room personally. A real stakeout. At exactly 11:45 a.m., Marcus grabbed his laptop and quietly positioned himself at a small table near the hallway outside the kitchen. From that angle, he had a perfect view of the refrigerator door without looking suspicious. At least that's what he hoped. He opened a spreadsheet on his screen to make himself appear busy, but in reality, he barely read a single number. His eyes stayed locked on the hallway. Co-workers moved in and out constantly. Jennifer from marketing entered first and grabbed a yogurt. Leo the intern came in carrying a protein shake. Chloe heated soup in the microwave before leaving quietly. Nothing unusual. Marcus checked the time. 12:07 p.m. His stomach growled painfully. Ironically, the lunch detective himself was starving again. Minutes crawled by slowly. The office noise faded into background static as Marcus continued watching. Then suddenly he noticed someone approaching the break room differently from everyone else. Slow, confident, relaxed. Not nervous at all. The person glanced casually down the hallway once before stepping inside. Marcus immediately sat up straighter. Something about the movement felt practiced, like this wasn't their first time. Marcus quietly closed his laptop halfway and stood up carefully. His heartbeat quickened as he moved silently toward the break room door. Inside, he could hear faint humming. Someone sounded completely comfortable. Too comfortable. Marcus took a deep breath and stepped into the room. And there, standing directly in front of the refrigerator, with Marcus's green lunch container already open in his hands, was David from IT. Marcus froze. Of all people, he never expected David. The IT specialist rarely spoke to anyone outside technical meetings. Most days David stayed hidden, in the server room, fixing computers and dealing with software problems nobody else understood. He was quiet, polite, invisible. But now he stood completely motionless, with Marcus's sandwich halfway lifted toward his mouth. The room fell silent instantly. David's eyes widened in horror. Marcus slowly crossed his arms. "That looks familiar," he said quietly. David nearly dropped the container. Marcus, I can explain." Marcus pointed directly at the bright green label. "My name is literally written on it." David stared down at the floor. For several painful seconds, neither man moved. The humming refrigerator suddenly sounded incredibly loud in the silence. Marcus expected anger to explode out of him. He expected shouting, maybe even satisfaction after finally solving the mystery. But instead he mostly felt disappointed, tired. 3 weeks, Marcus said slowly. "You've been taking my lunches for 3 weeks." David swallowed hard but said nothing. Marcus looked at the half-eaten sandwich sitting in David's trembling hands. "Why?" David opened his mouth, then closed it again. His face looked pale and exhausted. Not arrogant, not defiant, just defeated. Finally, he placed the container carefully onto the counter. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Marcus stayed silent. David rubbed both hands over his tired eyes before continuing. "My wife lost her job last month." Marcus blinked. David's voice cracked slightly as he spoke. "We've been drowning financially ever since." Marcus felt some of his anger weaken immediately, though he tried not to show it. David leaned heavily against the counter. "I've been skipping meals to make sure my kids have enough food at home." The words hit Marcus harder than he expected. For the first time, he noticed details he had ignored before. David looked thinner than usual. Dark circles sat heavily beneath his eyes. His shirt hung loosely around his shoulders. He looked exhausted. "I know stealing was wrong," David continued quietly. "I know it." Marcus listened carefully, while the tension inside him slowly shifted into something more complicated. "At first, I only took a granola bar somebody left behind," David admitted. "Then another snack. Then one lunch." He laughed bitterly at himself. After that, it became easier every time. Marcus leaned against the counter opposite him. The office thief he had imagined in his head suddenly looked very different from reality. This wasn't some evil coworker stealing food for fun. This was a desperate man making terrible choices because his life was falling apart. David shook his head slowly. "Your lunches always looked healthy. Homemade. Real food." Marcus looked down awkwardly. "I told myself one missing lunch probably wouldn't ruin your day." Marcus almost laughed at the irony of that sentence. Those missing lunches had consumed his entire week. Still, hearing David's side made it difficult to stay furious. "The sticky note?" Marcus finally asked. "The sarcastic one?" David looked confused. "What sticky note?" Marcus stared at him. "You didn't write it." David shook his head immediately. "I never even saw it. I always come late to avoid people noticing me near the fridge." Marcus sighed deeply. So there were actually two separate office troublemakers. Unbelievable. For a moment, both men simply stood there quietly. The entire situation suddenly felt sad instead of dramatic. Marcus thought about all the time he spent building suspect lists and planning traps while David had apparently been struggling just to survive financially. Still, sympathy didn't erase what happened. "David," Marcus said carefully, "you can't keep stealing from people." "I know. If things were really this bad, you could have talked to someone." David looked embarrassed. "How?" he asked softly. "What was I supposed to say?" Marcus didn't answer immediately, because honestly, he didn't know. Admitting financial problems at work felt humiliating for many people, especially for someone trying to support a family. David stared at the floor again. "I was ashamed." Those 3 words changed everything. Marcus suddenly realized this story wasn't really about stolen sandwiches anymore. It was about pride, fear, survival, and how quickly desperation can push ordinary people into bad decisions. Just then, footsteps approached from the hallway outside. Both men turned instinctively toward the door. Co-workers were coming closer. David panicked immediately. "Please," he whispered urgently, "don't embarrass me in front of everyone." Marcus looked at him carefully. For the first time since this whole situation started, Marcus wasn't thinking like a victim anymore. He was thinking like a human being staring at another struggling human being. But Marcus also knew something difficult was coming next, because catching the thief was only the beginning. Now he had to decide what happened after the truth came out. Should he report David to management? Should he demand punishment? Or should he protect a coworker who clearly needed help? And in part 3, Marcus faces the hardest decision of all, one that changes the entire office forever.